I felt compelled to share
Yeah.
information. And I knew that it could have repercussions, but I also felt that it needed to be shared and that it could help somebody. And I had people tell me regularly, thank you for sharing this because it makes me feel less alone and I don't have the courage to, or I can't because of this. So I just kept going. And now I feel really much more called to focus on offering my gifts and trust that people are going to be provided the information that they need to be provided when they need to.
I do believe that. And I believe that the work that we are doing as sort of the first waves, because we may not get to see this play out in our lifetime, probably won't, but it's pivotal for the evolution of human consciousness. So I want to honor you deeply for the work that you do and for the bright light that you are and being such a beautiful intuitive guide and bringer of the light. And we've been talking about this maybe about a year, and we're finally here. I'm so glad to have you on Fire and Soul.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And I love the name of it. It's perfect and it's great to see you.
For a little bit of context, your mother was on the show, maybe a year and a half ago. And that's how I got to connect with you, because we were doing a Zoom and you popped in and I immediately loved you. It was just like such a kismet connection for me. And then we just had all this joyous exchanges around all the things that we're going to be talking about today. And we're like, let's have this conversation on the pod. So
Yeah.
full circle, divine timing always. So just really getting present to just how good it feels to connect. And so for those who aren't familiar with your work as an intuitive coach, singer, songwriter, actress, all the things, entrepreneur, how about whatever you feel called to share about a little bit of your backstory, and then we'll drop into all the things.
Sure. So I come from a sort of a medical family, which, we'll drop into that briefly. But I've always been an artist and sort of, light work or whatever that means. I've always been a little bit between the worlds, really. And so my path was to pursue acting and singing. And then I also, as one of my many day job endeavors in New York City. I was a freelance book editor as well. And then that sort of morphed over time to coaching people on creativity. And then I discovered that I'm an intuitive. So then I evolved a whole new paradigm is maybe a little too strong a word, process for coaching people into their self-actualization and their creativity through coaching and intuitive work. So that's that. Basically, I'm a performer and a coach. And then I also happen to work with a precious metals company as well, which is a very timely thing these days. But well, it's always timely, but it's becoming more and more timely with each passing day. So those are the things I do. And it's really all, for me, it's all about helping to keep an open heart and helping other people open their hearts, really.
I love it because, we were talking before I hit record, and it's like, even looking into precious metals, which we're going to get to a little further in the conversation, or the sovereignty space that I'm in, the common law, trust law type of endeavors, which really kind of snags my soul at the moment. We're talking about how so many women are afraid to embark on, even in those conversations, much less those journeys. And so I feel that your work as an artist and an intuitive guide is helping her to unlock, right, that remembrance of her divinity and her spiritual power, really. I love that. What's cool is that so many people that I'm talking to and that I have the honor to coach, their gifts are coming on. So how did that moment happen for you? Or was it a moment of, wow, I have these intuitive gifts that I've been given? What was that like to discover that?
Yeah. I actually love telling the story.
Good.
It was so surprising. I mean, I will say, actually, I just put these two things together just now, but I think the acting always had a little bit of that in it, as well, and the singing, because there were always, when I started, there's sort of layers that would drop in the process of preparing a character or in the process of performing a song for a particular group or whatever, that I kind of had this sense of, where did that come from? So that was always kind of in there. And then with the sort of more formally, for lack of a better word, intuitive work. What happened was I was doing these divine love meditations which is based on the work of Dr. Robert Fritchie at I think it's called the World Service Institute. And he's a scientist, and he has studied the effects of divine love on the body and on the planet. And so my family and I were doing those meditations on a regular basis if somebody needed healing or they were going into surgery or they're having a hard time. And it's just a 2-minute meditation. And every time in the 2-minute meditation, I would receive kind of this mini movie and then we always share what we experienced. And I would share this mini movie that dropped in, and people would go, wow, feels really resonant, or that was real. And so then my mother said, I think you really have something here. And I sort of, because when our mothers tell us something, we kind of go, okay, thanks, moving on. Right. And then, and then we circle back, but, and then right. Yes. It's just true for everybody. Even if, your mother's a best-selling author, you still are like that. It's human nature. So then I was having a reading with another intuitive who actually also used to live in LA and used to be an actor and is around the same age as I am. But she had transitioned into that work, full time. And she said, I think you could do what I'm doing. And I said, really? And she said, yeah. And I went, well, I don't know. I have no idea how I do that. How would I even get started? And she said, why don't you just do half-hour practice readings for your friends for $20 and see what happens? And I said, okay. So I did, and it worked. I mean, when I say it worked, it just like what was coming in for people was very accurate, very resonant. And you know what my experience was? It was as if I had turned a hose on or unkinked a hose that had been running, like a current that had been running my whole life. And it was like a relief to have an opening for that.
Yeah, I just felt that. I felt that.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah.
And then it also, what I was picking up just now is that you were then just able to just let go of the oars and no longer battle, like trying to go upstream, and just allowed the river to carry you. And within that experience, everything would just come through. Is that?
Yeah.
That's just, I thought you just literally is That's way cool. These divine love meditations, I'm imagining like viewers and listeners saying, how do I listen to that? Yeah. I want my gifts to come online. So is there a spot that that we could just go and find that?
Yes. And you can definitely put the website in the show notes, but his organization is called worldserviceinstitute.org. Okay. And now, full disclosure, I don't believe that his intention with his work is for people to like discover their psychic necessarily. But he has a whole bunch of different, what he calls healing petitions, and he has some books and stuff, but his name is Robert Fritchie, F as in RTSCHE. And he's a wonderful man, awake. But he's a scientist. So he has studied. I'm not a scientist. I can't tell you in detail, but he basically, it's based on scientific research.
What's cool is that I really love bringing on guests who are fully embodied in their transformations, in their awareness, and then they offer up additional resources, right? Because this is what makes you you. And I had never heard of this scientist or this organization, but I absolutely, divine love is like,
I know, right? And
I have a better term than that. Oh, well, divine mother love is no.
Yeah.
It feels like a soul balm for us right now. So really feeling into that, and what a beautiful state that would allow you to gain access to the gifts that had been bestowed to you, I'm sure, at birth, but that unlocked, you mentioned that the scientist, is awake, and we were having a conversation even right before we hit record around, we hesitate to use the word awake. And I know with him, you're like, ooh, you wanted to qualify that because everyone listening to the show is on that path of awakening. Yes. But that distinction between awake and awakening, it never ends. It's not a finite destination. But of course, I have to ask, how was your awakening experience? How did it begin? What spawned that for you? Anything that you feel called to share that would fill in those spaces that not a lot of people talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, of course, I've always been, in terms of this emotional and spiritual end of things, I grew up going to like workshops that with my mother and at Omega, and I'd been around the work, so to speak, for my whole life in that realm. But in terms of sort of what's going on in the world and what's underneath it, and sort of the disillusionment and then rebuilding yourself after all that, that
Really
that's
well
how I would
said.
put it, right?
Mine was like an utter and radical deconstruction, but yes,
Yeah.
disillusionment
Yes.
is a nicer way to say it.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. So I'd say some aspects I think I, again, intuitively felt before, but really for me, a more conscious awakening it really was in 2020 when, I will say that I had a couple of hints before. Like I had dated a man who was a devotee of Amma, the hugging saint, and he had told me to get out of New York City, and that she was making some predictions about what things were to come, and I was not available for that information at the time. Um, so I had some hints, but then, and there were some others too, but what happened really was that at the beginning of 2020, I was living in New York City, working a temp job at the time. I wasn't doing coaching for whatever reason. I can't remember why. And, people were started talking about the virus and the masks and the this and the that. And I didn't really know what was going on. And then, so I left the city though, because I just didn't want to be in there for lockdowns and all of that craziness. And then basically over the next several weeks, really, I was living in a small town where my mom grew up, helping take care of my grandmother, who was 93 at the time and had just lost um, her driving privileges.
Mm.
And the circumstances were such that somebody needed to be on the property, and who was usually there couldn't be there. So it worked out perfectly for me to have a place to go and spend time with her and work from there. So I basically went from this bustling life in New York to this very quiet, because it was right at the beginning of all of it. I think I literally got one of the last flights out of the city.
Wow.
So I was just kind of looking at things and taking in information, but I was also working crazy hours and spending time with her. And I basically I'd say I was looking at some of the people I was looking at were Dr. Tom Cowan, Kelly Brogan. I think was the first time that I was exposed to some of David Icke's stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I had heard glimmers of also from my mom before 2020. But I just sort of had this, I just sort of was questioning, basically. And I definitely had never had my personal medical beliefs and principles become so center of the whole conversation. And it also so happens that so when I say I come from a medical family, my mom is a doctor and my dad is a doctor, and they're divorced, and their beliefs about medicine are very different. And so it was very bizarre, because I felt as if, to be perfectly honest with you, I felt like some of the conflicts that I saw play out in my childhood and adolescence were suddenly being projected onto the whole world. It was not mine, but those same issues. It was very odd. And then what happened was I started to say, I want to just stop listening to all this stuff and just tune in and see what I get.
Yeah.
So one afternoon, I was in this log cabin that my aunt and uncle had let me stay in, because they came home, and it was a log cabin that my grandmother had worked out of selling log cabins decades before.
Oh,
but they
my
this
gosh.
cabin. and it's on this pond in this tiny town outside of Buffalo. And so I sat down and meditated, and I just asked for some guidance about like, what is happening here? What am I supposed to see? And I got a very clear image and guidance of the darkness is holding on for dear life and white knuckling because the light is rising.
Yes.
And that was what I heard and received.
Full body chills. Yeah.
Right. Me too, actually.
Wow. Yeah, that was potent.
Yeah.
Because it remains, it's so true right now.
It's still true.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, that was what I felt. And I continue to hold on to that because it's been so, of course, more and more and more I've been exposed to and dug into more and more things over those few years. And to be honest with you, there were things that I looked at the beginning that I thought, oh, that can't possibly be true. And then a year or two later, I went, oh yeah, I think that is true, and I haven't red pilled myself nearly as much as tons of people. But
including your mother.
Yes.
Wait, when was she red pilled? Long before you, right?
Long before.
Okay. So even with her as your mother, oh, I see, because you had the mom and the dad, two different.
Well, right. Well, and also my mom was never political.
Yeah.
What happened was they made our choices about our medical care political.
Right.
And so she's always been holistic and questioning of shots, right? That's not, but I think that people got so caught up in the hysteria and the terror and, the propaganda and the media and blah, 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 that they forgot who she's been this whole entire time.
She didn't change her tune, but there was a narrative that could not have that voice be known. In that time, right? Because that would disrupt things. So they annihilated her. So, okay. So, but you watch that happen, but you're still like, let me see what's mine. Let me listen to the intuitive guidance that's coming through. So that comes through. And then what? Well,
then I moved back to Maine where I grew up. To be honest with you, my mom may have shared this with you when she came on, but she lost her partner right. So I was going to come home anyway because my sister didn't have any, childcare right at the time, and she had two little girls. And I thought, well, I'm not going to be in New York. I can go home and help. But then it just so happened that the timing was such that my mom needed me because she was going through this loss. So.
Yeah.
I was kind of like a traveling facilitator helper in my family.
Light.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So I came home back to Maine and then over the course of those next couple of years, I started to help run Maine Stands Up, which is a local medical freedom organization that my mom started. And honestly, what happened was I did go to some meetings, but at first I was very overwhelmed because, we went through the isolation of lockdowns.
Right.
And even though we didn't really participate fully, you're still not having as much social interaction. And when we first would have meetings, I would walk in and get dizzy. And I'm sure it wasn't just the people. It was also a lot of times people were coming and being around people and being hugged for the first time in weeks or months. And I'm sure I was probably picking up on that intensity as well. So I was sort of lightly involved. And then basically my mom was away one time and I was running a meeting and I just decided to bring some like 12-step structure to it because I felt that would serve. And then I ended up getting involved in helping run things. And that was amazing too, because I met people who like literally said they had worked for the government on geoengineering things. I mean, I just was exposed to so many different perspectives and stories that I had never, because I was living in New York City and I was a bleeding heart liberal.
Same. I watched CNN until August of 21. I voted. I'm sorry for any of my clients who might not know this and think this is something I'm not proud of, but I voted for Biden in 2020.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't vote at all in that one.
Well, I won't going forward, but still, I've learned a
Well,
lot.
that was a big deal for me. Because at the time, I thought that I was being asked to choose between racism
Yep.
and vaccine mandates or shot mandates. I don't know
Yep.
how much censorship there is on whatever
I
channel.
don't have
we're
any
on, but yeah.
censorship. And so,
Okay, great. So that's what I thought. So I said, well, I can't contribute to either of those. But I had literally campaigned in other states for Obama twice,
Same.
Hillary, like all of, yeah.
Yep.
And I'm
Die
not,
hard liberal.
yeah,
You
die
got a
hard.
sister on the path.
Yes.
It's very rare that we fully wake up and switch, but so
Yes.
many are now.
Yes. And, also for me, it was part of like when you said the deconstruction thing, it was also one of those big moments for me was, I think 2 years ago, they talked about the president of the Ukraine on the Oscars.
Yeah.
And I just went, excuse me?
Yeah.
This is not yeah, so they're just kind of as a process of, I'm sure you've experienced this too, watching people that you've admired and looked up to and realizing they're so, brainwashed, which is really heartbreaking. But anyway.
Either brainwashed or a part of it. And then that's where it gets really convoluted because the truther community, which I wouldn't identify as, they're just like, oh, controlled up or totally. Like, wait, hold up. Like, we don't really know for sure. But reality is that, yeah, it's so hard to see it. Right. And like, I don't know about you, but I can barely even watch a film anymore. It's like, it's all ruined. Rock and roll from the 60s, like sold out souls. I was just like,
no, I couldn't believe it when, I guess I shouldn't say I couldn't believe it, but I found it disappointing when, they took, I think it was, when they briefly took it was something to do with the Spotify thing.
I think you're talking about Neil Young and Joni Lee Mitchell.
Yes, Joni Mitchell. And I went, excuse me, did you forget what your lyrics?
I don't think they ever had it.
Oh,
this is okay. See, this is why we have to have this conversation. I'm awakening to the fact that, like, if we saw so clearly what happened with the quote liberal celebrities over the past 4 years, right? Which is their role. That's the agreement. You get this, but in exchange, you have to do that, right?
Yes.
And so I look back at the 60s, and sex, love, and rock and roll and free love. And I'm just like, it was the same then that it is now, because it was just beginning then. JFK Jr. was just assassinated, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I listened to this podcast about 2 months ago and I was like, that was the whole conversation. I'll share it with you privately. It was on the Luke Stylist podcast. Luke Stylist.
Oh, I love
Story. Lifestylist. Yes. And I was like, oh God, August 5 is the name of the band. So I hope to remember to drop that link. But when I connected those dots, I was like, God, it's so true. So just the disillusionment and like being with that is so much.
It's so much. So in some ways, I'm actually really grateful that I paused and did that meditation and received that image at the very beginning, because I continue to hold on to that. And I hope that's not Pollyanna of me. But I will say the last few years, I have also come to understand more that evil exists. I do. But I still believe that light wins.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that. I call it the negative polarity. I have used the word evil and I've definitely felt it. And where I really got present to it is when I finally started to do the deep, deep, deep shadow work and notice the evil within. That's the Carolyn Mace work, right? The deep work. And the moment that I could see just how evil I am to myself, about myself or others or the controllers or the people that we're even talking about here, I was like, oh, that evil exists within me.
Yes.
And so then I had to do all that forgiveness work, self-love work, and all of that. And then I was able to actually pay less attention to what they are doing and more attention to the light within and wanting to devote my life to being the bringer of the light, which is what I see you as and why you're here, right? Literally on this planet at this time and on the show. So
I completely feel that. Yeah.
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 And then when your mother gets canceled so publicly and ferociously, how does that impact you and or your family, but if you want to just speak
Yeah.
for yourself and or your dynamic with her.
Yeah. I mean, it's been challenging. It's been very challenging. For one thing, there are people who I considered friends
Yeah.
who have been really cruel about her
I'm
and
sorry.
towards her. And I mean, this includes people who were really there for me in really tough times back back in New York. And so I will say uh, it has given me I've been around celebrity a lot in my life. I've been around notoriety, both with my mom and with other, people in the entertainment business. And I don't, for whatever reason, it's just part of my path.
Yeah.
And so I've been aware of a number of dynamics around fame before, but this was another layer of, I guess, education around that people are fickle, and that they, whole groups of people can be acting like they worship somebody when it's convenient and easy and glamorous, but when it puts them at risk, or when the person does something or says something that they're not comfortable with, they will switch so fast. And that's that's just hard, but it is what it is. And, certainly it's given me even greater appreciation for the people who have stood by, and there are people, I'm not saying like, there are people in my life and my family's life who they may not necessarily agree with everything that she says or that I say or that she believes or I believe, and there are some similarities and some differences between those, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean they felt the need to completely distance or to publicly diss or anything like that. And that's always a really beautiful, that's always a beautiful gift, or I even have friends who we basically never even talk about that stuff because there's so much other stuff to talk about, which I love, especially some of my older friends. But getting back to, I mean, it's a friend of my sister's said to her the other day, you and your sister have probably one of the most dramatic, family dynamics from these last few years, because, we went from, I don't want to get into too much personal stuff, but it's just true that we went from having a family a blended family or whatever you call it, who could literally have holidays together, to now my parents they don't have any contact with each other anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. So at least for now. I mean, I keep saying someday there's going to be a wedding. So
That's right.
You're going to have to put on your big boy pants and whatever. But anyway, I think also, it's been a time of, well, okay, I'm going to go on a slight tangent here. In my current acting class, we talk a lot about in any scene, or if we actually, it's funny that you said about the films, because we watch a lot of films for class, but basically in any scene, any film, any play, whatever, each character has something or someone that they love more than anything. So for example, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Paul Newman's character loves alcohol more than right? That's an example. And I was thinking the other day, I went, because my behavior over the last few years, I've sort of gotten a little caught up in, the freedom movement and like protecting my mother, or just I've gotten involved in that stuff. And I went, that's interesting, because it's not really, if I were sort of choosing how I'd be spending my time, that's not really, I'm a grown up, right? But there's a deep loyalty when it's your family.
Yeah. Well,
And
not
I'm
always
also
for you.
Yeah, I'm also the oldest, So so yeah, it's been hard, and I have really learned a lot I mean, for one thing, there's also discernment about,
Mm.
mm, so my sister did this great post leading up to the last election because people were going at her about that she should be making some sort of public statement, going against what our mom's positions. And she was going, well, hello, we're two different people, right?
Mm.
So she did a beautiful, very eloquent post about that.
Mm.
And that's, I think, something that's important to remember is you can love somebody, you can even work, mom and I work together, and you can agree on a lot of things. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to agree with everything. And she probably wouldn't agree with everything I say. And that, I think that in this time leading up to 2020, and even more so since, because cancel culture preceded 2020, right? There's sort of this with the social media and all the things, it moves so quickly and people sort of put people in buckets. And it's like, oh, well, if you are seen publicly with that person, then you must be co-signing everything that they're doing or saying. And
Right.
that's not how humans are, It's one of the things I love about, do you follow House and Habit on
Yes.
Instagram?
Oh, yeah.
She's so brilliant.
And it's a full-time job. Her social, like literally following her social media is a full-time job. I don't know how they maintain.
I don't either. I mean, I guess it's her full-time thing,
follow it, you're in for a real
and with the kids, but
I know.
like, she's fascinating to me because she doesn't seem, I mean, I guess she would consider herself conservative at this point, but she doesn't seem like so overtly far right, and she comes from this very sort of literary kind of, at least from my perspective. I haven't gone as deep as you have, but I find people who are kind of more prismatic, very interesting, and also very relatable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a good barometer too of like, how would I want to navigate this if I were of sound mind, body, and soul, right? Like,
Yes, exactly.
Always sound, but yeah.
Yeah.
I've thought about what it might be like, or what it was like to be you in yours or your sister's shoes. And I can't even fathom, and yeah, so I imagine lots of blessings and lots of incredible, excruciating pain. And also, what makes me a little emotional, even just getting present to that energetic, is I think the biggest pain that I have, the suffering that I still have that's deep, deep, deep is, and why I thought there should be 12-step programs for those of us on this path. You're getting emotional too.
Yes.
Is there who's talking about this? Like, and all of the fallout. And then what about there was like this one big break in 2020 or really 21 when the mandates came out of like, oh, you no longer get to do this, this, and that. And also we don't want you in our life. Right. And so then, but then it was like the Russian dolls of awakening. That's the best way I know how to describe it, because then it was like, we've been so engineered, we've been so indoctrinated to like the teeniest belief that we didn't even know was important to us, that suddenly there's all these new divides and separations. And so it's like, it's splitting again and it's splitting again and splitting again. And so it's like, wait, you? And so then to be sort of standing amongst those that you've locked arms with, and you're like, you're still seeing life through, I'll take a phrase from David Icke's page, of like that same lens of perception of reality. It's so rare. And that, I believe, is soul tribe. But the part that pains me the most is those who don't recognize, and I don't know how to grapple with this other than it's on God. This is all divine order, right? How can we be so punished for speaking this truth that requires a spiritual courage in me I didn't even know I had?
Yeah.
And then to be with in peace and in love of like, okay, I get it. Like you can't talk to me anymore. Like, it's just so hard. Like, do you understand that everything we're saying and doing is not even just for me, it's for you and for everyone, but they can't. That's the part.
No, it's so hard. No, it's so hard. And it's also, so you and I are both blonde white women, right?
Yep.
And so in the zeitgeist, the response generally is you are privileged. So you have I mean, I do understand that if you're actually studying anti-racism and racial healing and all that, not race healing, not racial healing, you are understanding that privilege doesn't mean you don't suffer. But the fact is that in a fast-paced soundbite social media hashtag world,
Yeah.
it kind of does. What it means is if you look like that, your pain is not actually
relevant.
It's not actually relevant.
Yep.
And, and that's, sorry, but that's really BS.
It's unfair. It's not
really
right.
BS. And the people who are true healers, like true healers, which regardless of their racial background, what socioeconomic, whatever, they know that. And like, for example, going back to Luke's story, right? I found one of my coaches and mentors that I heard about from Luke was Preston Smiles.
Yeah.
Okay. So he's a person who I experience as being able to hold those layers, right? However, in the larger short attention span labeling people conversation, it's very easy for people to say, oh, so you lost a couple friends.
Yeah.
But actually, that's a really big deal.
A really big deal.
Especially as a single woman.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, I literally had one of my dearest friends from New York who lived one subway stop away from me, just send me a text and say, this issue, the vaccine issue it's just too emotional for me. I can't have contact. I may change my mind eventually, but and there was nothing I could do except say, I hear
about it.
Yes, that's true. Well, she has a lot of recovery. So yeah, no, there were people, I didn't have anybody well, that's not true. I did have, oh, that's right. I had a couple of college classmates that I literally, I just blocked everywhere because they started cyber stalking me. And it was a calling me out about something that my mother did an interview about, which I didn't even know about. And this behavior of holding somebody accountable because of something that, I mean, it's nuts.
Well, I think there's so much trauma.
Individual people. Sorry, go ahead.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm not a psychologist, but from my observation of just being deeply human and going through my own experience of it, there's just so much trauma that has not been healed in each one of us, right? That's ancestral, it's karmic, it's our part of our soul contract, all the things. And so we can't be, in general, the average human can't be with anything. So they just do what they're told and memorize a talking point, and that's it. You're good, you're bad, and this is safe, this is not. And meanwhile, it's just because they don't have the capacity, right, to do any sort of turning inward. What's real for me? What feels right for me? And then there's the herd mentality, and it looks like the whole world is going the way that mainstream media is telling you it is. When I think, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, I think it's a smaller and smaller percentage. I don't know if the tide has turned where it's more of the majority that are sweeping another way. And I really don't classify red or blue because I think that's really an old paradigm as well. But even if you just want to stay in the political realm of more conservative or liberal or awake and asleep, I don't really know what's correct. So take what you want, people who are listening and watching. But what's your consensus on that or your thoughts? Because it looks like, oh my God, legacy media is owned by they, right? And whoever they are, there's lots of thoughts around that. But so it appears as if, it's so wild and outlandish and you go so rogue to go against that. But I think it's not nearly as big as we are made to believe.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And the reason that I agree with you is because I've had enough conversations with people in the last couple of years that surprised me, where a lot of people are maybe on the surface going one way or another, but when you actually have a conversation, their views and their perspectives and their curiosity are so much more in the gray and so much more nuanced. And that's really refreshing. And I think for me, Maine is small. And maybe by virtue of partially this, my family is really polarized, right? So I start to think that everybody is. And then, of course, lots of people I went to college with, because of course, I went to an Ivy League school. So, of course, most of the people I went to school with have drunk the Kool-Aid because they're programmed. But anyway, what I find, but not all of them, not all of
Not
them.
all of them, but most, yes.
And yeah, so I think that part of it is I think social media has gifts for sure. And I also think it can for me, it's skewed my perspective sometimes because it is an algorithm. So you start seeing, right? And also it's designed to create, to some degree, division and controversy. Whereas in-person conversations or on the phone conversations, but in person is the best because, right, you can see people's facial expressions. You can even, almost tune into each other's breath unconsciously, all of that stuff. It's different. And I see a lot of people, including people who maybe from their demographic labels you might assume that they had particular perspectives, and actually their perspectives are different. The other reason that social media is misleading is because most people are not saying everything that they believe publicly, which is understandable because if you do, you get either canceled or just have people be mean to you, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do think that it's a lot more. I think that the number of people who are really far one way or another is actually pretty small.
That is so encouraging for me, especially speaking to you, being such a beautiful, intuitive guide and bringer of the light. And also knowing how embedded you are in the freedom movement and a real voice and a contribution. And then you're a part of like the people who are, you're part of these teams where they're really making these big, bold, sovereign moves. And that gives me even more hope. But lately I've been feeling, of course, it feels like something's about to happen and we all feel it. We can just know it. I don't know if it's the last ditch effort. It feels like no, but something big. And so it's just like, yeah, these last few years, I don't know about you, but I have been cultivating the spiritual strength
Absolutely.
to face anything. And that's why I go back to that evil within thing. It's like, you want to face that on the external, you better learn to face that inside so that you can meet anything on your path. And I started saying that like 3 years ago. No one knew what I was talking about in my community. And where I am on social, and this is where I had literally came out on my Instagram like 2 weeks ago, just crying of like, I don't want to be here. I can't even believe I'm saying this. I hate social media, but I love social media. I had to vomit. Like it was there for 2 years. I kept hearing myself say to anyone I would meet new, like, don't look at my social. That does not represent me and who I really am. And I was like, that's a problem then.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
But I was like, what do I really want to say? I don't even think it's worth it. It's not worth the time. It's not, and I say it here, but there's also a way to go about it where those who can hear it can hear it. Those who can't, they also stay connected. And I really have learned to just flow there because if, like, for example, 98% of my clientele right now, they can't really hear that.
Yes.
But they're in my path and there's no mistake in God. And so I look at that and I was like, beautiful. I don't know what this means. And maybe it has nothing to do with the fact that one day they will begin their awakening path in this way. It's like, it doesn't even matter. There's a consciousness that goes above and beyond these sort of paradigms, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's very, I would say, yeah, I definitely relate to that. I mean, I think a lot of my clients probably are somewhat clued into this because I'm on
You are who you are.
yeah, I'm on the internet connected with in a certain way. People know that, but not everybody. And certainly, plenty of people in my acting world may not know unless they're paying super close attention. And for a while, I'd say probably for the first couple of years, I felt of, the past 4 years of whatever this has been, I felt compelled to share information.
Yeah.
And I knew that it could have repercussions, but I also felt that it needed to be shared and that it could help somebody. And I had people tell me regularly, thank you for sharing this because it makes me feel less alone and I don't have the courage to, or I can't because of this, or blah, 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 blah. So I just kept going with that. And now I feel really much more called to focus on offering my gifts, and trust that people are going to be provided the information that they need to be provided when they need to. And I had this wonderful conversation with a new friend of mine who I met at church here. And that's been a whole other
Awakening.
That's been a whole other awakening. And she had been pretty involved in the freedom movement. She's on the same page around a lot of things. And then she said, I started to pull back because it felt like it came from a place of fighting and superiority. And that doesn't feel, I don't remember her exact words, but she just said, that doesn't feel like what Jesus taught us to be,
Yeah.
The first and most important teaching is love each other.
That's right.
And he went around and washed people's feet.
No.
If he were alive now, do you think he would say, did you vote for this person? Oh, I'm going to wash your feet. Did you have your shot? Oh, I'm not going to. I mean, no, he would say, hi, I'm here carrying God's light. You are God's light. I'm going to help you. I'm going to love you in this way, So that feels more powerful to me than memes.
Yeah, I want to take a moment and just allow that to really hit because I actually think that's what the Great Awakening really is. It's awakening to the Christ consciousness within.
Yeah.
And whatever that might look like, which is why I am so devoted to the shadow work. Not that I go shadow hunting by any means. There's enough of it around. I don't have to hunt.
Totally.
Right. But like that forgiveness work, healing, anything like with this is the work I was doing last year for like 9 months. I was in a life review. It was so painful. Started like at adolescence when I picked up smoking cigarettes that I finally let go of in June of last year. But as soon as I let go, life review of every relationship that needed to be healed, everywhere I needed. It was like I went through the amend step of just like a spiritual rehab moment. But it was like, it was inviting me to actually integrate the lower 3 chakras, which are all about me, mine, and I, right? Up into the heart, which is the unity consciousness. And then Jesus came into my life through a book that Ajashante wrote. Such a beautiful book called Resurrecting Jesus. Have you come across that work?
No, I have to look it up.
It's a mystical interpretation of the first of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, because he's a Zen Buddhist teacher who tried to be Christian, but the churches that he went to didn't fully resonate. And of course, that's so common with a lot of Christians. And so the way he wrote this, there's not a person, I don't think, on this planet, irrespective of their religion or not, that can't relate to the way he narrates. And anyway, it's a beautiful gem. I've now listened 3 times.
Oh, wow.
But that's where my relationship with Jesus became so clear in my life. And so I'm just deeply grateful. But yeah, that's the Great Awakening in my mind.
Yes. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I really, and I mean, that's probably, we could have a whole entire conversation just about that. But one thing that's coming to mind is, I just was in New York City on Monday, but the last time before that was in January. And I happened to be in the area, one of the main areas of the city where there are a lot of auditions and dance classes. And so I'd spent a lot of time there. It's like a few blocks south of Penn Station. And of Port Authority. Anyway, and there were these humongous, so it's basically Midtown New York City, these humongous billboards of Jesus.
Oh.
And it said, Jesus loves you.
Oh.
This is Midtown New York City. And I thought, so that's another thing when you said, are we, do you think more people are, this isn't what you said, but I'm translating it to, do you think more people have their hearts open than is being portrayed on mainstream media? And to me, that's a sign of that. And it's not, that's like one symbol of, do you know how many people are turning to Christ?
Hmm.
And not all of them in a, fundamentalist way.
No,
Most of
many
us
not.
not,
Yeah.
you know? So that would really, I found that so striking and beautiful.
What's so beautiful about what you just shared is that when I got that book, because are you familiar with Lori Ladd?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lori Ladd's been on the show a couple times, and I just love that woman. And I heard her in some YouTube video talking about listening to this book called
Mhm.
Resurrecting Jesus. And it was like such a trigger for me because I had been so
Oh,
programmed to just what you must be
yes.
stupid if you believe in that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And just
Right.
owning that.
And
Okay,
we
good.
are programmed that way. Totally. I was. Yeah.
Yeah. But then she said she had not only listened to it once, but twice. And I'm like, Lori freaking Ladd, you are a busy woman. How in the world did you have 18 hours twice, to listen to that book? By the way,
Yeah.
now that I've listened to it 3 times, I'm like, oh, I'm going to go on my fourth because it's just so
Wow.
good. Oh,
Wow.
so, so, so good. Anyway, I've listened to like one chapter 6, like, I don't know, 19 times. If you guys
Wow.
ever get there, you'll love it. Anyway, so then I had a river trip that I was going on from LA up to Sacramento. And if you know California, that's about 9 hours by car each way. And I was like, perfect. I'm going to listen to the whole book up and down. And on the Highway 5, driving up, as I'm listening to this book and things are like unlocking in me
Mm,
in a way that I had never experienced. I was seeing billboards, Jesus loves you, Jesus saves, like
wow.
just like what you're describing.
Yeah.
It's like bumper stickers. I was like, okay, what is happening? It's like clearly it was. And who else saw that? I don't know, but it was meant for me and whomever could see it. And I love how you phrased that a moment ago. Whomever's hearts are opened. So it's
Yeah.
not even like the awakening or a sleep conversation anymore or paradigm really.
Mm,
Is your heart open? Because if your heart is open, then you would see that you would love Biden and Trump as an example,
yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
they're
Exactly.
humans who have been highly distorted in lots of ways, but
Mm,
ah, they are us.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love this piece that you brought in a couple of times about, looking at the darkness within, which of course that's part of being an actor, right? Is looking at your all your range as a human, and not you never judge a character that you're going to play. You don't
Oh, I
judge.
hadn't heard that. Wow, that's
So
so cool.
you got to, because you're going to be embodying that. If you're
Yeah.
commenting on it with judgment, then you've lost it.
Mhm.
So, but also, I feel that I don't know. I can't really figure out what makes a person quote unquote wake up and what makes a person not, because I have so many friends who are super spiritual and done a lot of healing and years of 12 step this and that, and they're just not looking at any of it. So
Yes.
I don't know. And again, I'm with you that I just give that to God, because I'm not I'm
Yeah.
not in charge, and it's exhausting to pretend that I am. So, but that being said, I think that maybe part of what prepared me for the last few years was that I was doing a lot of, my own trauma healing. And I had a similar, not with the smoking, but I had a similar experience of stopping something and all of a sudden all this stuff coming to the surface. And that was probably 3 or 4 years before 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that prepared me in a way to let go more, to be, I guess, a little more welcoming of grief and rage and all of the things. Um, yeah. And also, when you said the thing about how traumatizing the last few years have been,
Mhm.
I think that's true for everybody,
Yeah.
regardless of what side you're on or
True.
whatever.
True.
Um, and it's certainly my hope that we continue to co-create ways to heal that together, and that's one of the things that really gives me hope is I mean, yes, the coaching world is has its challenges, and that's a whole other conversation. But still, there are so many people who are so interested in, like you said, bringing their gifts in and holding space and doing their own work and helping other people do the same. And maybe because I can't remember what it was that I was listening to. There was something about how the experiments that the CIA did, basically, that so much of what has been done, quote unquote, to us,
Mm-hmm.
it comes from actually trying to traumatize us on purpose.
For sure. Just keep
And so
talking.
wouldn't it be amazing if this time is when we go, yeah, you can traumatize us, and we have the tools as humans and light beings to heal ourselves and each other.
Well, that's what I think we're doing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I understand it's like a rhetorical question, but like that is,
Yeah.
it is what we're doing. And it's why I'm so devotional to not being afraid to take a look inside, which is why I stripped away my coping mechanisms, my numbing mechanisms, so that I could be filter free, feel all the stuff that I had suppressed, numbed out, or just overrode by pure ego and like drive and push
Sure.
force masculine energy and let me create all this, success or whatever, so that I don't even have to
Yeah.
look at that. But we're no longer afforded that luxury. It's not possible, right? So the mirror is out. One of my favorite quotes from my all-time favorite poet, Rumi. He's like, as you live deeper in the heart, the mirror gets cleaner and clearer. And I used
Mm.
to say that so much in the beginning, but I do believe that. And I believe that the work that we are doing as sort of the first waves, because we may not get to see this play out in our lifetime, probably won't, but it's pivotal for the evolution of human consciousness. So I want to honor you deeply for the work that you do and for the bright
Thank
light that you are. And I also know that we are about to wrap, but I want to spend some time talking about another thing that you've awakened to, which is
you.
how important it is to become aware of gold and silver and precious metals and investing in ways where I think people in general can be overwhelmed. Like, yeah, I know that I need to do that, or I should have some of that and be diversified, but they don't really know where to begin, or they're like, where would I store it? And I
Mm.
remember talking to your mom, gosh, a long time ago now, and you guys had just embarked on this beautiful invitation that was totally unique than anything
Mhm.
that I had ever heard. And then I think Luke Story talked about it on his podcast.
Yes.
Oh my God. Hi, Luke, if you ever listen to this, and we're talking about you
I know we
today.
keep talking.
and actually in a law study group with him too. And so
Mm.
kind of anchors all of this. So I actually want to express my deep and profound gratitude for him bringing
Mm.
others onto his show to awaken
Oh
us in
my
different
gosh,
ways, right?
seriously.
Like, and he's really going for it lately. So deep,
Mhm.
deep bow. But can we talk about that and what
Yeah.
people might need to know about the opportunity that is awaiting us?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for asking. So, so my mother and I have partnered with a precious metals company that provides a really unique way to get your precious metals. I want to be super clear, it's not EFTs, like which is electronic shares of gold and silver. This is holding, owning physical gold and silver. It includes safe storage. It includes being able to liquidate at the touch of a button. You can purchase fractionally, meaning you can literally start with $1 at a time, which is, a lot of people, when you talk about precious metals, they go, oh, well, I don't have the money for that. But you have $1. And so, and it's also, there's education within the community and resource that we work with so that you can be an educated buyer. And then it's not a political organization at all. It's not a religious organization, but it does tend to attract a lot of awakening and freedom oriented people, which is wonderful.
Mm.
And so, it's funny that I can't remember if it was before before the podcast recorded or during, but it's, for me, it's such a lovely marriage of masculine and feminine, because what I do with it is I share this message with people and I help people get started, and it's very relational, right? And the company itself is so solid, and it's founded by and run primarily by a lot of really solid, healthy, masculine leaders.
Yeah.
And some wonderful women too. But it's, I don't really believe that we always have to have like 50-50 everything. You know, I feel they have, I just really feel they have my back and our backs as a collective membership all over the world. And they're doing really groundbreaking stuff with technology that, you know, major financial and tech companies are taking notice of. So it kind of covers a lot of different bases. And, you know, it's really, you know, Robert Kiyosaki talks about how he and his wife choose to, if they want to receive a certain amount of money, they purchase that amount of money in gold.
Mm.
Now, that is maybe not accessible to everybody. Gold is really expensive. But I think that the principle applies anyway, because my experience, and I've seen this because we now have worked with hundreds of people all over the world to help them access this resource. Having and owning physical gold and silver is a prosperity multiplier.
Mm.
It's like alchemical. It is. And also having physical diversified assets, it makes you feel safer with everything going on.
That's very interesting that you just said that. I've never heard anyone say that
Yeah.
owning, having in your possession, or at least owning
Yeah.
physical gold and silver is an alchemical process that unlocks prosperity. I want you to expand on that, because when I first invested, it was about 2 years ago, and I think I did like 10K worth of like
Yeah.
mostly silver, a little bit of gold. And then like, I'll just say like probably another 10K or 15K or something. That was last year. And then over the course of the last year and a half, and it feels like a miracle. How did it happen? It's God, right?
Mhm.
My business has grown to the strongest it's been ever in the history of almost 7 years.
Wow.
So I'm like, wait, what? Because I mean, I asked God to be my business partner. Then I was at my altar one night, and everyone knows this story, but asked my angels and my guides to magnetize people who needed my message, because I didn't want to market the way that I was so feverishly programmed to market and hustle and grit. And I'm like, I can't do that anymore. So if this is meant to be in the best for all, please bring them. And my business has grown in that way. So this alchemical expansion quality, can you speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, I mean, this is an observation and
Yes,
sort of
fair.
a theory, right?
As an intuitive guide, let's be clear, but yes.
I mean, first off, I was very struck by the fact that Robert Kiyosaki literally makes that statement in his book in print. It's his latest book is Fake. And it's an amazing,
cool.
but anyway,
wow, I got to get that. Okay.
yeah, you really it's mind blowing, I think. But anyway, so that is one of his principles. And then I have certainly observed it in the lives of plenty of other people, myself included. And sometimes it's, you know, income coming in. Sometimes it's, there's a woman that I know who had a significant unexpected debt come up, and it was canceled.
Whoa.
And she said that she felt her ownership of gold and silver was part of the reason why that miracle occurred. The other thing is, remember, sometimes gold and silver are mentioned in the Bible.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
So, and then also, you know, silver certainly, and gold to a lesser degree, but both of them are used in various medicinal ways. There's this, I don't know what it is, but there's this like water infused with gold and silver that we get from this woman locally that's very detoxing, you know what? So, and then, you know, there's colloidal, all that. And even I had an experience early on where when I started, you know, sharing this message, and I'd received a bunch of physical silver at this conference because I won all these contests basically. And I got really sick that night. I think I was having an upper leveling moment, like from the big leap. But anyway, I lay down. I was
Oh
going to
my
get
God,
on.
I love that you just referenced
Okay.
that. That book changed my life in
It's
2019.
an amazing book, right?
It's by
People
Gay
say,
Hendricks, like an upper level, like, oh, there is no ceiling. Like
upper limiting. Yeah, not upper
up.
leveling.
Yeah. There we go.
When people say, what's your favorite personal growth book? That's the first one out of my mouth every single time.
I love that one. And then I love Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. Oh, so
Yeah.
good too. Yeah.
I
But
should read
yes.
that. Anyway,
Oh, so good. Anyway.
I was having this upper limiting moment. That's my perception.
Yeah.
And I had to get on a plane the next day, and I went, well, I'm not. What am I going to do? So I mean, of course, I took like some vitamin C and some echinacea and blah, all the things. But I lay down literally with pieces of silver all over my body and next to me in the bed.
Mm.
And I woke up the next day, and I felt so much better. Yeah. So and then also, of course, keeping in mind that, like you talked about the chakras, money is related to your second chakra, first and second chakras. So it can also be very healing to anything you have going on there. So yeah, those are my impressions about it.
I love it. Not to mention, there is a very real opportunity. You know, we brought on a conscious wealth creator who, I don't know if you're familiar with Jay Griff. He
Oh yes,
the podcast with Aaron Apke, the Great Awakening Show.
yeah.
And he was on, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago, and we are entering into the fourth turning, right? And so everything's collapsing. There will be all kinds of new opportunities, and this is very much an important part of the diversification of everyone looking at the upside of what will be possible on the flip side of what will feel very dark and apocalyptic potentially, but we'll see.
Yes.
But okay, so for purposes of time, let's actually just get and I'm not an affiliate in any capacity, FYI. I would just make me so thrilled and grateful for anyone who feels called to go and check it out and then get involved. I trust you. I trust your mother implicitly.
Thank you.
Such truth tellers and warriors, you know, in this world, light warriors. So where can they learn more information about it?
Yeah, thank you. So if you go to realmoneyrising.com/info,
Okay.
that is where or realmoneyrising.com, either one of them, really.
Okay.
That's the website that Mom and I have. So you can basically sign up for our list and then be notified of the next events and all that.
So beautiful. I know that we're just about done, but I bought silver because Cliff High said that it was going to 600x. And I was like, okay, that's it. You know, even if it's just 10K, like I want $600,000, like for a 10K investment, who wouldn't? And I actually do feel like that's going to happen, maybe not to that degree, but in my life. And so that feels really exciting. Again, I don't put all my eggs in one basket, but that's not the point. It's being well diversified and through a portal or an organization that's conscious, right? And like that's in it for the right reasons. And that's what I know you guys at Real Money Rising are really moving from, right? That frequency. Okay, my love. I never want this conversation to end. We're gonna have you back, and we'll just dive in wherever we want to dive in.
Thank you.
Where can people who feel called to connect with you? Where's the best place? Is it social?
Yeah, probably. I mean, we can put my email in the show notes as well, but Instagram is the easiest. So it's at Ann C. Moller.
Okay,
so
great.
they can follow me on there. They can DM me on there. And so if you want to learn more about the coaching and intuitive work I do, you can also reach out to me there about the gold and silver. Any of that stuff is totally available.
Amazing. I love that. It's like giving them an intuitive guided session and like, okay, how much should you get? I don't say that lightly. Like this is real. So for me, I get really excited because as crazy and wild as it is, there's also some beautiful opportunities that it's like a once in a multi-generation type of opportunity. And I just feel like, gosh, are you going to seize the moment, right? And so this is what's here, and we take what we can as we can, even if it's, again, starting with $1. So I appreciate that perspective. Is there anything that you wish you'd been asked or that you feel called to share as we really wrap for reals?
Yeah. Thank you. This image is coming to mind because you said something about, these opportunities that are coming at this time. this image is coming to mind of like how pearls are made, and that there are so many people creating such amazing offerings and communities and things right now. And it's almost as if the intensity of this time is the grit that is making us all into pearls, if we're willing to say yes to that, which I believe is what, to me, that's what, by the way, what I believe sin is when we say no to what God has for us. That's a whole other thing, but that's what I believe is
That's beautiful.
just being misaligned, right?
Yeah.
So certainly in my work with clients, it is my absolute honor and privilege to help you recognize the pearl that you are meant to become, right? Or that you already are. And I just am so inspired by what people are creating and having this light be reflected back in this conversation. And so let's all shine as the pearls that we are.
That's so beautifully said. Thank you so much for coming
Yeah.
on the show and sharing your pearl heart with us.
My pleasure.
Oh, what a pleasure. Thank you so much, Ann.
Thank you.